Hey, I'm Andre Camillo, and this is Cloud and Sec. If you follow me, you should know that I talk about cloud, cybersecurity, AI, and up-and-coming technologies in these realms. Today, I want to talk about technology that is embedded into every single thing you do on the web, right? If you browse the web, you probably know what cookies are, right? Fragments of software that customize your experience with visiting browsers or visiting web pages, in fact. Now, these cookies, they have different capabilities and they expose you to a lot of easier ways to interact with websites. But they also expose you to a lot of risks. Malicious actors have ways to hijack the cookies that are saved on your device in order to replay your session on their computer without even needing to know your authentication methods, for example. This main capability or this main attack vector is called cookie hijacking. And it's extremely powerful for websites that do not configure their cookies properly and for you as a user. Right? So essentially they can bypass your authentication, your multi-factor authentication for any websites that are improperly configured. So looking at that and looking at also the way that the industry is trending, cybersecurity industry is trending towards what we call exposure management and continuous threat exposure management methodology, where we're always looking and assessing the risk of everything we do online and how we interact with different pieces of software. I thought about bringing that concept into managing our cookies, and I developed a cookie manager to help you assess whether you have unsafe and improperly configured cookies in your sessions and which cookies you should probably delete. Now, this is all part of a browser extension that I created called Cookie Check. So let's have a look at the main problem statement here and what this browser extension looks like. So the first thing I want to do is talk about the fundamentals of cookie security. Let's get into it. You know me, I'm Andre Camillo. I'm a security solution architect, and I've been doing this for a little while now, talking about cloud cybersecurity, working with this in enterprise organizations. Now, let's get started by cookies. What cookies are: pieces of software, of pieces of data that are essentially saved in your browser and stored in your browser to either customize your experience or make your experience easier to utilize, mainly driven by e-commerce applications and any applications that require to save your session, right? That's what it is used for. Now, cookies have some key capabilities, right? So they can be stored permanently in your device, meaning they don't have an expiration date. So this is very risky by default, right? So if they never expire, it means anyone that has access to your cookie can replicate them somewhere potentially, right? If there are other flags that aren't set properly. Or they can also be session-based, right? Session-based meaning they're going to last for a set amount of time. Now, on top of that, cookie also have what we call flags or configuration settings that help secure them properly. Okay, now the first flag that I want to talk about is the secure attribute. So this here is to ensure that cookies are transmitted over encrypted channels, HTTPS connections. So it helps you protect from being intercepted and by utilized on what we call man-in-the-middle attacks. However, this protects confidentiality, but not the integrity, okay? So an attacker can still modify the cookie if they have access to the client system, or they can intercept the initial insecure connection. The second type of flag that I want to talk about here is the HttpOnly flag. So HttpOnly flag prevents client-side script attacks like JavaScript, for example, from accessing cookies. So there are insecure web pages that could exploit cookies that have been properly configured so that they can access cookies from other websites, for example. This flag reduces the risk of cross-site scripting, XSS attacks. However, there are some limitations here. It does not protect you against cross-site request forgery attacks or cross-site tracing attacks. The next one that I want to talk about is the SameSite flag. SameSite flag is used to control whether cookies are sent with cross-site requests, helping you prevent cross-site request forgery attacks. What it means is it helps you maintain that cookie to only talk to specific sites. So then there are different values for the SameSite attribute. So there can be 3 different values for strict cookies that are only sent to the same domain, or what we call lax, cookies that are sent to the same domain and for GET requests to different domains, the relaxed setting. And then there's none, cookies that are sent to any domain but requires the secure attribute. Okay. Next up, I'm highlighting here the expiration date flag, which essentially limits the lifespan of a cookie. So the best practice is always to limit the lifetime of a cookie. Of course, you don't want eternally accessible cookies with sensitive information anywhere in your website, or if you're a user anywhere with your sensitive data, right? Then I'm also flagging here what we call the domain and a path. So this here essentially controls how subdomain access your cookies, and then what paths and directories your cookie can essentially talk to. If you're looking at them more specifically, the domain attribute specifies a domain for which the cookie is valid. So it should be set carefully to avoid exposure to subdomains unless intended. Okay, so narrower is always better for domain here. And for path is similar, right? It specifies the URL path for which the cookie is valid. Limited scope, it preventing unauthorized access from other parts of the domain as well. So the narrower the setting, the better. So these are the settings under which cookies can work with. So I thought about exploring how these settings are enabled in specific cookies and what risk they pose to you as a user. So let's have a look at what my browser extension can actually do. Okay, so let's navigate to the Google Chrome web store. I developed a Google Chrome extension because a lot of browsers are just Chromium based, right? Just navigate to chromewebstore.com and look for cookie check. Right, so cookie check right here. Of course, there's no evals at the moment. It's not going to be widely utilized, but it was a fun project to do anyway. So right here, what I want to do is, what I did, I explained to you what it does and what it looks like, right? So an overview, what does it do? It has specific access to all your cookies, by the way, right? So there are a few flags that you can work with when you're developing cookies, such as active tab access, which is best in terms of limiting the number of access that given extension has to your cookies. So active tab is very powerful and gives access to all cookies within that tab. However, for my use case, what I wanted to do is to have a look at all cookies stored in your browser. So then I expanded that a little bit to all URLs. So I have to have access to all URLs in order to have a look at all cookies. That doesn't mean I'm storing anything. It doesn't mean I'm collecting anything, because I'm not. My browser works as is, and it does not connect anywhere else, right? It's meant to be used only for you, and it's developed under an account that has multi-factor authentication, so there's no way someone would push out an update to it and tamper with the code improperly. So therefore, it's completely safe. That's another reason why I developed it. First, I wanted to have an experience with developing it. Second, I wanted to address the challenge of session hijacking. Third, I wanted to understand how to work out with Google accesses, Google Chrome accesses. And fourth, I wanted to assess on the blue side, how does it look from a browser extension capability as well. So therefore, in the document, or in the extension description here, you have an idea of how it all works. It's also all documented in my GitHub, in the GitHub for this project over here as well. And if you need anything, there's some potential developer email address that people already found, right? Of course, there are bots everywhere. So as soon as this went live, I started receiving automated emails from lots of people trying to sell me services to make this, to market this. So let's go ahead and add this extension right here. So as I add the extension, you can see here top right corner, I can now finally see this browser extension. And as I click on it, I get a list of all cookies that are installed, if you wish, or that are stored locally in my browser. As you can see, it's quite a long list. Now what I did is I distributed and I attributed risk scores based on different flags for the cookies, right? So each of these flags that I explained, they award a specific risk score to the cookies. The algorithm is described into the documentation if you want to look at it. Now, the main benefit of the tool here is that we can easily see the spread of the risk risky cookies in our environment. If I want to organize this, I can just click on the risk, and it's going to sort out all cookies based on risk. As I scroll to the right hand side, I can see a list of why they are risky in terms of the flags. I can see the domains, of course, that they are related to. And most importantly, I can take a couple actions from here. If I want to identify what the cookie does, I connected this extension to what we call the Cookiepedia, third-party service here, provided by OneTrust, in fact, that it has some results on specific cookie names. So I can easily check what is the purpose of each specific cookie that is stored in my. You can do that yourself too, right? Just click on view details for each one of them. And secondly, you can take a second action, which is to remove the browser, that particular cookie, right? So you can just remove them and queue them, right? So there's a lot of here that I could potentially just do that myself if I wanted. Now it's not meant to be a bulk management kind of tool. There's lots of improvement that could be done. It's mostly a proof of concept for what can be done and for you to manage potentially undesired cookies in your browser. However, I can see how it's just a first step into something else. It'd be great if I could send this information elsewhere, if I could interact with this information elsewhere, if I could interact with a SIEM, for example, and send some of that information to alert people based on risky cookies. However, there is a larger statement at play, which would be understanding and prevention inline. If there is someone trying to access your cookies, it'd be ideal if this could alert the user, right? Or straight up block that action, which starts to get into an EDR kind of realm, and that's totally out of the scope for what I was trying to do. So what this does is showcase the power of tools development in current times, right? I developed this in a matter of a weekend, essentially. Took me a few more days to get it published. Now, what's so powerful about this is creating a proof of concept of this is something incredibly powerful, especially coming from a real challenge, which is cookie hijacking. I barely explained the attack here, and I don't have time to do that here today, but I highly recommend to have a look at it. There's great video on YouTube from someone called Attack, Defend, and Prevent. That video is amazing on session cookies and how to prevent some of these attacks. But this here is just my explanation of an interesting project and proof of concept that I did to do that. Now, I threat modeled my code in many ways, particularly looking into potential risks and removal of bad practices from the code. So I only granted the permissions that were needed in order to execute the action it needs, which essentially is the all URLs. It's the approach I took. It doesn't mean it's the best approach. It doesn't mean it's the correct approach. This is a proof of concept. It's public because it works. And it absolutely has a purpose that it is suited for. However, there's lots of improvements that I could take this on for, and I will at some point, I believe. But hopefully you found this interesting, because I did find this amazing to work with. And hopefully if you're interested, go and download it. Have a look at it. And if nothing else, keep safe. Cheers.